And that's it. So again, hello everybody. My name is Matic and welcome to episode of SaaStock Local. My guest today is Bram Kanstein. And just before we start, again, we are live on Clubhouse, so be aware that we are recording this, and it will be available in the end of the week. Bram is an early stage startup expert and product builder. He's a maker of Startup Stash, #1 all-time product, upvoted product on Product Hunt, and currently he's running a course on NoCodeMvp. Bram, welcome to the session and thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, man. Thanks for inviting me.
So first, when I discovered the no-code movement during my daily routine of checking Product Hunt, where you can find like hundreds of products launching every week, I was looking for tools that would optimize or make my processes easy. So private processes and business processes. But in the recent years, no code is more than just connecting Zapier to send notifications from Gmail to Slack. But you can literally build a website, a product, a mobile app. So if we start with just a simple question, what is no code or less code, and how it's changed since you started?
I don't think it has changed that much. For me, no code is really about it's twofold. One is what you just mentioned, like what you were searching for, right? Like automating tasks without building custom code. So for example, using Zapier, connecting different SaaS applications and run sequences that you set yourself. And so I see that as part of no code no code. And the other side for me is really about building, quote unquote, products, right? So kind of how I started is when I found Card, which is a website builder. And I saw that they also had these custom form elements that you could connect to Zapier. And then through Zapier, you could connect to Airtable or Google Sheets, for example. And when I basically saw that combination, right, like website plus automation plus some sort of database, I thought, okay, that combination basically applies to, 80% of startup ideas, right? If you have a certain request or you're connecting two parties or you have a marketplace or a service product or whatever, then that is basically the skeleton of a product like that. So that's kind of how I started and how it's evolved. Yeah, I see there's more tools, but I think in essence it's still the same kind of, right? Like facilitating this website plus automation plus database combination in different ways. So now there's also no code tools that allow you to create member-only parts of your website or subscriptions and stuff like that. So I think, it's evolving in different ways in terms of the applications themselves. But like in the end, I think there's maybe now, maybe 50 types of website builders. It's really up to a user to figure out and also find out and learn what suits me best. Like, what do I understand? What do I like working with, etc. So, I don't know if that's a direct answer to your question, but I feel, that application for me, I like the product building part more than the automation part. For example, if you have a really complex automation challenge. Sometimes it could even be better to build something that is custom code than to rely on no code. But it's really a contextual question, obviously. Like what?
Yeah. So you started NoCodeMvp 2 years ago, if I'm correct. And what was the main goal? And who were your ideal persona? I guess you were targeting non-developers, people without engineering knowledge. And how did you come up with the idea to create a course and not not something else.
Yeah. So when I had that realization of that combination of tools, right? So again, website builder, automation tool, and database tool. Again, I think that is applicable for, let's say, 80+% of startup ideas. I thought, okay, how can first I wanted to show like what you can build with that. So, for example, in the course there are 6 examples of types of products that you can build without code using that combination. But also, yeah, like you mentioned, I once read that maybe 1% of all people know how to code. Yeah, I believe that probably not all great ideas also come from that 1% of people, right? So there's the 99% of people probably have way more ideas. So those were the people that I wanted to focus on. So let's say product and business people, but could even be finance people, right? Like eventually I think that if you have a startup idea, it's the most promising ones are based on a right insight. So even when you're a finance person and you've been in the finance world for the past 10 years and you've seen a certain type of process or going in a certain way, or a problem being solved in a certain way, or problems arise, like if you really know that problem or a certain need, then yeah, those are the people that I want to enable to build and investigate their idea and then build a first product that they can use to validate with people in real life.
Okay. Yeah. What problem did you trying to solve with Startup Stash back in the days? Because it was a huge success on Product Hunt, and you did the exit you sold the product. And you probably started really with the niche audience.
Yeah.
So yeah, how did you start?
Yeah, so for the people that don't know, Startup Stash is it still exists, startupstash.com. It's a curated directory of resources and tools for startups. I don't know how many there are now on the website, but it started with 400. And basically it started when I was working at an investor. I had this list of bookmarks of tools and resources that I saved to use during, when I was working with the startups from the portfolio. And at that time, I was also really active on Product Hunt, like helping founders get on Product Hunt, etc. So there were basically 2 things. At one point, I thought, okay, I think I know how to, take a certain problem or need and turn that into a product, launch it, market it, and earn money, etc. So that was basically the start, my personal challenge. Like, okay, prove that to myself. And then secondly, I thought, okay, well, now I have to come up with an idea, obviously. And then I saw my list of bookmarks and I thought, hey, there's not really a place where you can find these resources and tools, at least not 6 years ago. And the only website I found was of Steve Blank, who's a famous a business professor and a writer, etc., on like this topic of generating business ideas and validating business models, etc. And he had steveblank.com/resources or something like that. But that page was just an endless page that you could scroll through. Sometimes there was like a bold category name, no images, nothing, just flat, just links. And at the time, that was basically the only website that I could find. So that's what I took as inspiration. Like, can I build a better resources page for startups? And that's kind of how it started. And basically, yeah, it was super basic. So I'm a non-technical non-technical guy. So I thought, okay, how can I build this? And I found this WordPress template, which was basically a directory template for, I think it was restaurants or something like that. Yeah, that's what I used. And then I just deleted the lines of code in the template that I didn't need. So I just installed the template, looked at what it looked like, and then just did right-click inspect in Chrome, and then I looked up the code, and then I just deleted it from the files in WordPress, and then it didn't show anymore on the page. And that's kind of how I built it. So I kind of reverse built it basically. yeah, that's how that got started.
Great. I got a question an hour ago from our community, and it's kind of related to what you are saying now. So, can you start to learn no code without having a proper idea, and then find the idea during the learning process?
During that learning process, well, yeah, I think that's kind of specific, but I feel that, I think like 3-4 years ago, like a lot of conversation was about you need to learn how to code, like you need to become a developer, then you can build startups, etc., etc. And now I feel that that is just one part. So for example, if I just look at myself, like I don't know how to code, but I know how to build a product, for example. I can communicate with developers. I know where my I call that my hard stop is, right? Like when I need to shut up and listen to someone who can actually code, like say how difficult something is or how long it takes or whatever. So because there's so much other stuff you need to do when you want to build a startup, right? Well, obviously you have to build the product, but there's all these other things you need to do. And so I think there's a huge power in being able to code, but there's also a big downfall because the coding and the hacking away is the most fun thing to do. So if you are able to code and you come up with an idea, you instantly mostly default action is just build what's in your head, and then you put in just your time and sweat basically, and you build a solution. But then you have to go look for people that have a problem, basically, right? And that is a much more difficult challenge than, for example, people who are not able to code. They have to figure out, is this something that I should pursue or not, right? Like even when you think I need a technical person, why would a technical person join you when you just have an idea, right? Like just a story. Like everyone has limited time, so why would someone join you? Same for when you ask someone to invest in you, for example. So that's kind of my starting point when I think that if you learn no-code tools, you can do that first part yourself as a non-technical person, right? So whether you have an idea or not, that was the question. If you have an idea, I think it speeds up your learning because you're applying the tools that you're learning to an existing idea, right? So then you're building your own thing, which is always more fun. But yeah, I don't feel that you necessarily have to have an idea. It's also, yeah, when people start learning how to code, do they have an idea? Yeah, probably not. But yeah, that's why. And I think the easiest way to start, for example, if you want to learn how to build a website with Card or Webflow or Bubble, just I always go to it's called onepagelove.com. And it's like a directory of really awesome, like one-page websites, just from brands and products and stuff like that. And I just look for a website that I really like, and then I just open that in one tab, and then I try to rebuild it in, well, my website builder of choice. But that's kind of how I learned building websites. I just rebuilt websites that I like to see how the tool works, but also how long does it take me, right? Does it take me half a day or a few hours? Or so if you have an idea, I think it's a plus. It helps you. You're applying the tool that you're learning. If you don't have an idea, it's there's no danger. Just you can think of anything. Just rebuild your favorite website, right?
But then at the same time, you have to think what is the minimal viable product and if you are solving the right problem. So going back to your course, you're not only teaching the no code, but you're also teaching probably developers how to launch, how to go from 1 to 10, let's say, and then 10 to 100. Were you surprised on the ratio between marketers and developers when you launched the no-code
Yes.
MVP?
Yeah, so about there's now almost 600 people in the course, and 25% of all of them are developers. And I ask everyone who joins, like, why did you join? And almost all of these developers say that what I just said about the building trap, basically, right? That they all share, like, hey, yeah, I've had 3, 4, 5 ideas where I just dove into building instantly. And then I ended up after, I don't know, 2 weeks or 2 nights or whatever with a product. And then I realized, yeah, now I have a solution / product. And now I have to look for people who have a problem. And yeah, again, in the past 10 years, I've never seen that work. And eventually it's really demotivating, right? So, and like I said before, for developers, nothing's more fun than hacking away, solving problems, etc. But if your purpose is just learning and hacking away, totally fine. But if your purpose is, yeah, I'm pursuing an idea that I like, where I think it could be a business or whatever, right? That's different type of motivation. Yeah, if you eventually end up with, let's say, 4 weeks spent every night building that product, and then you get to a point where, well, you launch to crickets, there's no one. Yeah, that's demotivating, obviously. And so with my course, I help people like that to take one step back, which or maybe sometimes a few. And for some people that feels like slowing down, right? But it helps them to really take a look at their idea again, right? So if you ask someone, could you pitch me your idea? Then in general, the pitch is something like, my product, I have an app which is solving this problem for this person, and I'm going to reach these people in this and this way, and I'm going to earn money in that and that way, right? So like there's already 5 or 6 assumptions in there, why it should be an app, or why not a website, why not a physical service, why is it that target segment? Do they really have a problem? Can you really reach them when you talk about that problem, right? Is the problem big enough, etc.? So like all these assumptions are already in there. And you can imagine that if you pitch that to yourself and then start building instantly, if just one of those assumptions isn't true, and probably more aren't true, then your idea dies. But then you already spent a lot of time in developing the thing.
And money.
Yeah, and money. Sometimes there was one guy who signed up to the course, and so I asked him, like, why did you sign up? And he said, I already spent $100,000 on this one idea, and I haven't earned anything yet. Super smart guy, like totally not a dumb person, but just the wrong approach, wrong mindset, which eventually, had him spend 100K. And it's it's also not really about me saying this is a good or bad idea. That is just really up to you. And that is also what I feel is the challenge, even for myself, someone who's really aware of, falling in love with your idea, not spending too much time, or really create focused time, right? Like validating and talking with yourself, or perhaps with your team, like, hey, I talked to 10 people. 5 of them say that they have problem A. Is this something that we should pursue, right? Like that's a pretty, it's a difficult conversation, because if you say, yeah, these types of people have this problem A, and you set that in stone, basically, that is the foundation of all the other stuff that you're doing. If that is wrong, then eventually you will fail at your idea, right? And so that is really the pivotal moment where you decide if you should pursue an idea or not.
Cool. There's one question from Yasna. Can you see the chat here, Bram? So I'm against product first mentality. Work a lot with engineers who have fallen into building trap. Oh, okay.
Just a comment. Yeah. No, and again, and I feel that it is so interesting because, like I just said, like let's say you are a non-technical person, right? And if you go up to a technical person and say like, hey, I have this idea, do you want to build it for me, basically, right? Or with me? you have to ask yourself, why would someone join you if it's just a story, right? So the tactics that I teach are applicable to non-technical people, because then they can create a better story, which is actually validated with insights and data. And then they can go to an engineer and say like, hey, I not only have this idea, but I already put in this work. You know, I built the MVP. I have some people on an email list or paying customers or whatever. But I need to build A, B, C, and D, because then, you know, it can grow or it gets validated more or whatever. That is a much more concrete proposal, right? So that works for a non-technical person to technical people, but also for technical people for themselves, right? Like if you just have an idea, yeah, should I build everything that is my idea? Well, probably not. And that's always what I say. It's not about, can I build this? Where the answer is almost always yes. It's more about, should I build this? Where for most ideas, the answer is no, because just most ideas suck, and that's fine, that's okay. But you have to realize that before you, just spend too much time and effort into something that just has no merit. And I think, if you talk about, you know, personal motivation, that is really my personal motivation. Like I want to help smart and motivated people to not waste time on the wrong ideas.
Okay, going back to Product Hunt, when is the right time to launch on Product Hunt? Because if you have just the MVP with a simple landing page, 0 users, or maybe you have 5 users with the feedback, is this the right time to launch on Product Hunt?
No, I don't think so.
So when do you think is the right time? So probably you have an existing customer base, so and the
Well, so
community.
for example, Product Hunt is just one channel, right? And it's just one way of reaching a certain amount of, well, a mix of people in this case. And you could use it in the early days, but then you have to set the right expectation, right? So I don't know how many users there are now on Product Hunt, probably more than 1 million. But not everyone is interested in your product. And it still costs time and effort to do a good Product Hunt launch, etc. Right? So why not spend that time on, I don't know, let's say you're building a product for horse lovers. You know, I don't know if there's any horse lovers on Product Hunt, probably just because it's such a big group. But you're probably much better off if you spend time and efforts on being on horse subreddits or horse Facebook groups or even local horse communities, whatever, you know. So I feel that channels like Product Hunt, or also sometimes certain types of press or blog posts on certain type of platforms, they sound interesting because of the volume, right? There's a lot of people that could see what you're doing. But you have to ask yourself, are those the right people? Like, are those the people that I want to reach? Because in the beginning of an idea, it's really important to find the right people. And if you just gather people from any random place, so let's say you're focused on horse lovers, but you just get people from any random place, then you're also spending time and efforts on the wrong people when they are in your app, right? When they have support questions or what, you know, whatever. And so that is, I think that is my answer. So if you have a bit more clear about, you know, this is the target group I'm targeting, this is my value proposition, this is also my expectation of using a channel like Product Hunt, right? Like I want to get 100 signups or, you know, whatever the number is, then you'll have a much better experience, I think.
Perfect. So just for all the attendees, please raise your hands on Clubhouse if you want to join and ask a question. And just if you want to join here on SaaStock Live, also let us know and we will invite you to the stage. Meanwhile, I have a question also related to Product Hunt again. How important it is to build a community early on? Not only to launch on Product Hunt, but also to gather feedback from the community. Last week, we spoke with Guillaume from Lemlist, and he started building community without any goals, without any metrics. He just started posting in the group on Facebook, and they are doing like 5 million in annual recurring revenue now. So what are your suggestions with the building a community? Should we start with a close community early on? Or should we wait?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the type of product or service you want to build. To me, the goal of an MVP, again, is to find the early adopters of your product, right? Like people who are aware of their problem or their need and who are looking for a solution. Like those are the people that you want to capture. And I think community sometimes is a misused word, because I don't know if it's applicable to any type of product, but I feel in the beginning, if you find your early adopters, that could also be a community, right? Even if it's 50 people. Yeah, if you have a special relationship with them and you can create a way to engage with them, then for me that is also already a community, right? Because if you can build your product upon them using it and their feedback and all these things, that is of course super valuable. But yeah, for example, Lemlist, like you mentioned, so I don't know their exact story, but I can imagine that if you start with a if you start not with a product idea but just with a community idea, I'm building a community where I share tips for LinkedIn, tips and tricks for LinkedIn, for example. Then if you do it right, you attract people who are really engaging on LinkedIn or dependent on LinkedIn, right? Like using LinkedIn for their business, etc., or for their content distribution or whatever. And so if you build a community by giving value, for example, let's say build a community about LinkedIn power users, whatever, then you also create a relationship. And then when you talk to 100 people from your community, if you then find the problem of content distribution, which Lemlist helps you solve, then that is the start of your idea, right? So then it's community before there's even an idea, but you don't start the community with the goal of building a product. You start the community with the goal of finding a certain type of people, right? Like a segment that you provide value to, and then eventually you get value back, right? Like discovering a problem for that customer segment is getting value back. And then if you solve that problem with the first product, then you also already have a group of first possible users, right? So yeah, I don't think it's a strict approach like that, right? Like I have a product idea and next to that I'm building a community. It's probably first a community, and then because you have a relationship with those people, you can find problems that keep them busy, that they think about. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
So let's have an idea. Personal. You want to build a personal CRM. And I spoke with a lot of people that wants to use a personal CRM, which is a tool that helps you manage your friends and business relationships. How would you start? Which tools would you recommend? So starting with Excel spreadsheet, should we go to Airtable and play with Airtable, and then see what tags or what tags should be used in Airtable or spreadsheet? So if we go to the plastic example, that's why I choose personal CRM, because it's a bit easy than selling to horse owners. So it's a micro SaaS, let's say. How would you start?
Yeah,
Airtable, and then
this is a fun question, because I wouldn't start with Airtable or any tool, basically, because I think let's say that you talk to 10 people who are in tech, right, like us. If you talk to 100 of them, probably more than 50% will say something about personal CRM, right? Like the holy grail of micro SaaS seems to be a personal CRM. So anyone can relate to, or maybe you can share to the listeners, but like a personal CRM is basically, hey, this is my network. This is how I met this person, right? This is the last time I talked to Matic. We talked about this, he lives there. This is, right? Like to engage with your network and keep that up to date, etc. And basically it comes from, what's his name? There's like this famous story of I'm looking it up right now on my computer. Like this famous billionaire. Let's see. Yeah, I can't find it. But a famous American billionaire who, in his whole lifetime, he created like 200,000 of these little cards on his network. From, it said like John F. Kennedy met there and there, and this person met there, Nelson Mandela met there and there, and that's like basically the ultimate CRM. I'm kind of deviating from the question, but so personal CRM is like a thing, and I actually would start with just talking to just maybe 100 people or something like that, just to see what is your process now, like how do you do that now, and really understand that current behavior. Because, for example, that's the billionaire story I got from a personal CRM app that I tried out a few months ago, where and I was really, really excited about it. It's called clay.earth. Yeah, I'll share it in the chat. Clay, CLAY.earth. So anyone can check it out. I was actually in the paid beta, but I'm now out because I didn't use it. Like, I looked up on their website and I thought, okay, this is just like, I need to have this. Then I had it and I didn't use it, so I canceled it. But now that triggers me your question about like, how would you approach this? And for me, that would really be, just talking to 100 people, maybe even more, just to figure out what is your behavior, right? So, for example, in this case, I think I have the need for a personal CRM. I got the one that I thought was, it totally appealed to me. I didn't use it. So apparently my behavior is different from what I think my needs are. And that is where I would start. Does that make sense? Just to have, because it's easy if you have a problem that you also see yourself, right? So you could build something for yourself, which I think is one of the best ways to start, but still talk to enough, quote unquote, I don't know what's enough, that's super personal, people so you can really like say to yourself, hey, this is not only my problem, but it's really a problem for a lot of other people. And I can also identify like what type of people they are, right? Like, are they entrepreneurs or marketeers or whatever? Is that an answer? Yeah.
I'm using Airtable for my personal CRM, but it doesn't work because I don't want to remember their birthdays, because this is what Facebook does.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know how I met them or who introduced me to a specific person, or maybe I connect you with somebody. So these are the types of connections and, let's say, tags in Airtable, but I haven't found the real value that I would be willing to pay for it, honestly. So that's why I bring it up as a product, maybe as a product idea. And I know there are a lot of similar products out there. There's Monica and a lot of personal CRMs. Cool. Are there any questions from the audience? If no, I have actually two questions that are not related to your course or building the MVP. What advice would you give to yourself 10 years ago or before Startup Stash? Let's say business advice.
Build your network. Give value without expectation, and build your network.
What do you mean by build? So go and network.
Oh, yeah, just I did that like unconsciously, just out of interest for other people. But I think like if you, I don't know if this is right, but I feel that it is. It's just, I don't want to say easy, but it's just so doable to just create a Twitter account, give value, whatever the subjects are that you find interesting. Could also be on LinkedIn or whatever, but just show what you know about, basically. And that's when you will find, you know, like-minded people, and build a network in that way.
Yeah, I heard an interesting. I spoke with Vasile Zaro about how he built his network, and he said, you know, I was in the totally different industry. Now he's in marketing for the last 10 years, and he said I didn't know anything about marketing, but he started networking with people, and he didn't talk much. He just listened. He listened to his mentors. He listened for his mentors for years, and then he started talking. I mean, I'm a bit. Maybe it was not years, but I think I did the same. So when I started with building a SaaS product, I didn't know what SaaS is, so I just listened to my mentors. I was silent. They said, "Bring us a water." I brought the water, but then you learn. Eventually, you learn, and then you can start talking, and then you can start networking.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's better to say less than. And learn from others. Yerney, you had a question, and that's why I invited you to join us. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me? All right. Hi, Bram. So it was interesting what you said, right? I think, yeah, it's the right way to start talking to people, but...
I don't hear him much.
Do you hear me, Matit? Bram, do you hear me or not?
I think he doesn't hear you.
I don't hear him. No.
Okay, I can actually ask a question. So how would you? Oh, we can hear you.
So Matthias, I'll tell you the question, and you can repeat it. So the idea is, you know, like, okay, you have these tests, but how do you decide, you know, like, what is a positive result? At what percentage of that 100 people, for example, right? Like, where is that limit where you say, like, this is validated, so this is not, right? Is it 10%? Is it 50? Or, you know, how do you decide on that?
Okay, that's a good one. So let's say that you ask 100 people. What is the number that will give you the right answer? So is it 10%?
Yeah, I love this question. I love this question. The answer is I don't know. That's up to you. No, I think this is the number one question, and I think it's such a logical question. It is the question that you're asking yourself, but there's no one else than you that can decide, you know. Okay, I talked to 100 people, right? And you don't only talk, right? You let's say if you do some sort of interview, you ask them 5 questions, whatever, and then you have the transcripts of the interviews, and you have some insights. You plot them on the questions, you know. So you gather your insights, but then it's really about, what does that tell you, right? Like you as a person, because you started this idea from a certain point with certain assumptions and all these things. So that's why it's such an interesting question to ask other people. But I'm not in a place to answer it for you, right? Like we can only like spar and maybe talk, but eventually that decision is up to you. And it's also really a personal thing, right? So for example, I'm pretty risk aversive. So for me, I would have to have well, let's say a very big I should be really convinced or have a lot of certainty when I want to pursue an idea. But there's also entrepreneurs who pursue an idea with, I don't know, 5% certainty, right? They see something happening in the world and boom, they're on it. And for them, that is validated, right? And so it's such a personal question, and I see you nodding, but I don't hear you. But I hope that makes sense in a bit. But it's also a feeling, right? Like, okay, I have this idea. What are my assumptions, right? I think person A has problem B, and obviously, when you have an idea, you have an idea of a solution C, right? And usually, the best question to ask, you go and look for person A, right? So not random people, you're really looking for single moms, whatever, if that is the segment that you have an idea for, right? So you talk to 100 single moms. So, and then in interviews or when you have a talk like that, the first question is, how do you solve problem B, right? Your assumption of problem B being an actual problem. And then they start talking, or maybe some say, I don't really have that problem, right? But when they start talking, you listen and you just try to understand it more than they personally do. So that when you talk with 60th single mom, you can say, well, yeah, you're a single mom. I think that in this situation, is it correct that in this situation you experience this and this problem? And if she then says, wow, yes, then you're talking you're talking more and more and more. So it's also really about converging on what is actually the problem, and you're trying to navigate that. And that is also why it is a lot of work to talk to 50 or maybe even 100 people. But I think that it's really a lot of work. But I think it really helps narrow you down, that if you really find a problem, then there's so many benefits to talking to as many people like that, right? So for example, if you get to person number 60 and she identifies with the proposed problem immediately, you'll have an amazing conversation also with the next 40, right? And then you really have a strong indication and conviction that you, for this segment, have found a problem that people are aware of and recognize. So yeah, I think that really pays off, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So it would be more about.
I still don't hear him, but you can listen, Matt.
You'll have to repeat, Matt. So it's more about really knowing and understanding the problem and the user habits. Let's say in this first 100 interviews, that actually focusing on some certain KPIs, quantitative KPIs.
Also, I'll share on the Clubhouse. We're listening to his question, and Matic is going to repeat the question, I think. Yeah, but you have to unmute yourself, Matic, also on Clubhouse, and yeah.
Your name, please ask again.
I just wanted to recap if I understood this correctly, right? So with this, let's say first 100 interviews, right, the focus would be more about understanding the problem and understanding the user, and not so much on certain KPIs, right, like quantitative KPIs.
So yeah, the question is that in the first 100 users, you have to more understand them and not focus on the KPIs. And I think he already answered the question. Is I think you have to have the feeling. You have to kind of combine data and your experience and feeling, and seeing the eyes of the person, if they are really interested in what you are asking or maybe not. So based on 100 people, you can say, okay, maybe these 20 or 30, they're not my segment. So let's focus on 70% or maybe 20% on them. So that's why I think personally that it's so hard to build a product step by step, because you have to do all of this, because mathematics is pretty simple. Go from 0 to 10 users or paid customers, go from 10 to 100. It's simple. Find 1, 2, 3 people. But then you have to get the right segment, because if you miss the segment, if you miss the problem along the way, you can lose a lot of money or just lose the company. So I think that was the
and I think maybe to end this answer, I saw other questions too. Like, it's about creating steps for yourself that are manageable. So for what Matic said, right? First step is talk to 100 people. Second step is what do they tell me? What do I think? And then what Matic just said, hey, I see that these 40 people of these 100 people really have this problem, and I can identify them because I can say, it's this and this segment. I can qualify them. And then the next step, so that is one step. Like, each step you can fill, or you can decide, I'm not going to go with another step, right? So let's say you identify 40 of these 100 people. Can you find another 40 of those people? If that is a yes, then you talk to those people, and then you sharpen your understanding of the problem. And then you could come at a point where you say, okay, I've talked to 80 people that I can put in this customer segment. I have a fair understanding of their problem. I'm confident that if I find 800 more of these exact people, they will all have this problem, for example. And then you can decide, okay, let's follow this route, right? I'm going to solve this problem for these people. And then eventually an idea can still fail if there's only, I don't know, 1,000 of these people in the whole world and you cannot build a business on it, right? So you also still have to keep that in mind, that that is also a step where you can fail, but you will never get to that step if you don't make the first step small like that, because you want to be able to navigate, right? And what I talked about before, if you have an idea in your head and you build that instantly, then you skip a lot of steps, which makes it most of the times harder to eventually validate a market, a business, etc. Does that make sense? I only see your face. Thanks.
Cool. Okay, he said yes. Thanks,
okay,
awesome. I'm inviting Oscar. He's
yeah, I also saw two people on Clubhouse.
Yeah, we will switch to Clubhouse later because we cannot do both at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah. Setting up a startup in 10 minutes. It's like.
Yeah, I saw Oscar's question. It's it says, you mentioned it's important to work on your network. How do you actually validate your network? Like, is the network then building the right audience? Yeah, with network in your 20s, I meant just people that you can learn from or add value to, or, you know, stuff like that. Not with a super clear goal, just to expand on knowledge and people, you know, like I've cold DM'd so many people, just asking them for coffee, even when I had 5 followers on Twitter or stuff like that. So it's more about yeah, just building those connections.
Yeah, I mean, this is how I met you. I did DM you on Twitter. Hey.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
basically,
and it was the same with other founders. You have to find the channel that is not overpopulated. Your Twitter account, your Twitter feed is, you have a lot of followers, so it was a wild guess and for me. But if you find somebody that is opening like a new clubhouse or a new podcast, they don't have a lot of followers, then you can ask them as there. So okay, my last question is, do you have any books for early stage founders that you would recommend, beside the 4 steps to epiphany and Eric Ries and all this stuff?
Wow, that's a good question. I can't really come up with a book. I think I read more articles and just follow people and what they share and what they build. Like I'm a reader, but I don't have an initial book. No, sorry.
Okay. What articles do you read?
Yeah, very broad question. Yeah, I really think so. For example, for me, Twitter has been super valuable. Like it took me a few years to build a good feed, but I think, yeah, there's so many interesting people in this tech internet space who are on Twitter, who share amazing insights and articles and stuff like that, and that is kind of just my primary source of information and also entertainment, basically. Yeah.
Cool. So we will switch now to Clubhouse for the last question. I would thank you, Bram, for being with us. Thanks for all the attendees for joining. Sending you the link. So we have, I think, Sasha raised hand on Clubhouse. So I think we can end this recording here. Once again, thanks for coming, but just stay tuned for the last question on Clubhouse.